One of the most talked about names in Korean cinema these days is Park Ji-hoon. With the box office success of The King's Warden, his presence as an actor is once again grabbing attention. Idol-turned-actors like Park Ji-hoon are now emerging as leading forces on the big screen. Today, we take a closer look at the meaning behind this shift with Jae Soh, filmmaker and professor from the Seoul Institute of the Arts. Welcome back, Professor Soh.
Hello, Professor.
Nice to be back.
So, as Walter earlier mentioned, The King's Warden has now surpassed 15 million viewers. It is amazing. So, yeah, we're going to talk about Park Ji-hoon again today, especially because we're seeing behind this scenes footage of him and also his emotional acting. So, how did you view his performance in this film?
I think Park Ji-hoon's really amazing in this movie. Actually, I didn't really go in with that much expectation, but immediately I was kind of interested in Park Ji-hoon before because of his work in this series called Weak Hero. And that's the story about where he plays a nerd in high school and he has to kind of fight through the bullies. And I really noticed his acting was sort of like really kind of interesting in that situation, but bringing that performance almost to Danjong as this kind of ousted king, it worked. And I think it was really brilliant piece of casting on Cha Han-jun's part. And basically he's also said he just saw the role played by Park Ji-hoon and no other actor could have played this role. But I think in the theater, when I saw it with the audience, it was like people were really immersed in his acting, especially the ending. I don't want to give spoilers, but a lot of like sad stuff is happening. And I kind of felt like he wasn't acting. I felt like he was really embodying the character, which is a perfect example of cinema acting, So I think he's kind of transcended this moment, and also it's like a turning point in his career because I think now, for the first time, people are really looking at him as a performer for the screen. And I'm really looking forward to not only him as a performer for music, but I think there's so many more possibilities of movies and dramas that he could star in.
Definitely, and I especially love it when he has when he's about to cry, and he really has those tears and the moisture in his eyes right before he cries. So I think that's very special about his acting, is what I thought when I watched the movie.
Yeah, right. But meanwhile, let's change it up a little bit. In the film Mad Dance Office, Arin, she's from the girl group Oh My Girl, is getting a lot of attention for her acting skills as well. So among idol-turned-actors, who have you recently taken on the big screen? Like, are there any you're watching in particular?
Well, going to Arin's performance in the Mad Dance Office, this is kind of a remake of Shall We Dance, the Japanese film about sort of this kind of middle-aged man who finds pleasure in learning how to dance. And in this one, it has Yamera and Jae Soh and Arin. And Yamera plays sort of a civil servant who's like kind of a stickler for rules, and then she learns flamenco. So, so you have this, and then Arin plays her daughter, Harry, in the movie. And basically, yeah, I saw clips of the movie, but basically it's just amazing. Her performance is, again, sort of like Park Ji-hoon. She really changes herself into that character. You're no longer watching an idol star acting, but you actually see her personifying the daughter. And I think a lot of times these dramatic roles, sometimes it really hinges on one character. And in this one's really tailored to Yamera and Jae Soh, but Arin kind of shines through and steals the scenes in the movie because her acting really shines. And I think it's another example where I think performance across different platforms seem to work, especially for cinema with idol stars. So it's a really good example of that as well. Yeah.
Yes, definitely a pleasant surprise. And now it really seems that idol-turned-actors are going beyond their name recognition and actually leading to successful box office numbers. But who are some earlier examples who made that transition well?
You can go way back to like Rain, but recent ones are, I think, for movies especially, it's Bae-suji from Miss A. She was in Architecture 101, and then Yuna, who's in the news a lot of times, and she has like comic timing. She's from Girls' Generation, kind of an older, the sort of first tier of idol stars, but she was in Confidential Assignment where she was with Yoo Hae-jin, who's also in The King's Warden, and so she plays his daughter. or his wife's like sister, but basically she's really terrific in the role. And there's a movie called Exit where Yuna came out, and I'm thinking also of IU. You know, we think of My Mister, Hotel del Luna. She was also played a very dramatic role in this movie directed by a Japanese director named Hirokaze. It's called The Broker, and I thought she was terrific in that. And of course, there's Im Siwan from Chea. He's the attorney, Biseng. These are feature films where they really prominently, like I think he's transitioned as an actor. And we were talking about Do Kyung-soo the other day from EXO. So he's been in a lot of movies, Cart, My Annoying Brother, Along with the Gods, The Moon. So I think basically the table is set now where a lot of sort of transition is happening between, I think I was talking about cross-platforming between performance on stage to the big screen. And I think more and more, I think audiences are kind of taking to these stars because they already come with a fan base, and they're ready to see them on another sort of screen doing a role. So.
I think IU is a very good example of that, as she not only still tours every now and then for her musical career, but she manages to keep dramas and movies also involved, and she's one of the biggest idols in Korea to come out of Korea. So for her to balance those two and still be as good of an actress as she is, I think she's doing that very well.
Yeah, I really have to agree with you because she's one of the top singers, plus also her acting is terrific, as also Professor Soh mentioned.
Exactly. And because of this change in direction for idols, do you think the casting idol turned actor actually affects the theatre audiences? So maybe, like you said, they had fans from their musical career. You think there's going to be more of those seen?
I really hope so, because right now, as you know, Korean cinema is suffering. So we kind of need to sort of pivot a little bit. And I think, there was a complaint earlier, about how there seems to be only just a handful of actors that are acting in Korean cinema. They get all the roles, like Lee Byung-hun. And, I think it's great that Yoo Hae-jin, who's sort of become he was like a glorified supporting actor. And now he has a huge role in, basically The King's Warden. Almost he's the main star of that movie. But I think with the idol sort of coming in with the fandom, and audiences at first were kind of skeptical of these people, wanting to act. But as I mentioned, all these stars like IU, they seem to transition into sort of like a chameleon into these roles. And I think the really interesting thing is that the sort of these idols want to be actors, because I think, this is my own thoughts, but you can't just be on stage like when you started in your teens and your 20s.
Right.
If you're transitioning into kind of your 30s and 40s, I think, all your joints are going to hurt a little bit. So I think it's better to sort of go into another kind of, mode. And I think it's also like it brings into everything that they're already doing on stage. When they're, performing a song, people are emotionally invested in that. So now they're concentrating their energy into acting. And I think it really sort of, works in that way if they just really try to do that. Yeah.
Right, but Professor Soh, they do have that pre-existing image as that idol. So do you think that could lead to higher expectations or maybe bias when compared with maybe rookie actors? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of times when you have sort of actors that are of a certain caliber and an idol star comes out, there's a lot of people kind of nervous. And also, even though you have the fandom, the regular cinema audiences might kind of look at it like, what are they doing in this movie? But if you cast the right sort of idol for the role, I was thinking of Arin for the movie, or, Park Ji-hoon for, King's Warden. If you're the sort of like the producer or the director that casts the appropriate person, if you put maybe an idol star trying to play a doctor, all of a sudden it might not work. But I think if you cast well, and I think the other thing is that challenge of being critical, like the people like really looking at idol stars acting to see if they're really doing it. It really forces the idol stars to actually either take up acting lessons, or they really try to concentrate their energies into becoming sort of more a character-like actor, you know. So I think a lot of times, you know, I look at filmmaking, acting as in two categories. One is like you're a star and everybody knows every time you're in there, you're the star playing that actor. Then you have certain actors that become the character. And I think idol stars kind of sit in the middle somewhere where you recognize them for their sort of like their musical sort of abilities, but then if they start acting really well, you start to like really look at their work, you know, in an interesting way.
You talked about acting school there, but unlike the past, many idols today are receiving acting classes or character training even before they make their musical debut, maybe already like wanting to get possibly an acting job before their debut if it doesn't work out. But what kind of impact is this going to have, you think?
Well, the first generation of idol stars that kind of made the jump, they usually jumped into dramas on television and they were kind of attacked by their bad acting. But I think it's becoming sort of the BTS model where, you know, BTS is a group that started and a lot of their sort of fandom started with social media, SNS, and sort of YouTube. And so, you know, the company Hive has a system where it's the world view. So basically you create a world for the idol stars, and in the world, there are different platforms. It could be webtoons, it could be movies, it could be, you know, like dramas. And basically the actors come out of that because they're kind of already trained to switch modes. And I think it's only in their interest to be cross-platforms. You have the same thing happening in Hollywood. You would have somebody like the Jonas brother, you know, coming out in a movie, and people kind of at first they're like, what is the singer doing here? But you know, soon they see that as sort of their persona as well. And I think right now the idol industry is changing, and they're realizing that maybe in their teens and their 20s, they're making, you know, them sort of like really viable for the stage. But as they get older, and I'm thinking BTS is now, sort of like the reunion, but you're really curious, are they all going to go separate careers as solo artists, or are some of them going to act? That's the next question, but I think that's definitely something the industry is like, you know, preparing themselves for these days.
Now, we started with Park Ji-hoon. We're going to end with Park Ji-hoon. He's actually coming back with a solo comeback next month.
Yes.
And so when artists balance both acting and music careers, what kind of impact does that have on their work?
I think it's a smart move because I think in a way you're cross-platforming into different sort of media, and having fan bases on both will keep basically your brand power sort of viable for a very long time. And even if we all get older, I think the idol stars of the past that were sort of like the sexy, you know, gyrating bodies with incredible, like, you know, their movements are just like something, you know, a normal person can't really do, to when they're older, they're starting to act. I think your career will just kind of extend into like your old age, you know. So I think it's a smart move to start doing that when you're kind of transitioning, when you still have the power and you're young. And I think Park Ji-hoon's a perfect example where I just see this guy sort of being successful for the next, you know, 30, 40 years. It's kind of endless because he can succeed, you know, putting out an album every year, or he could transition into movies. And right now he's also in a series that he's coming out at the same time. So these guys are really busy, for sure.
Indeed. He's very good at balancing and making those transitions from, for instance, 내 맘속의 저장 and to 이놈. So very different style. But thank you very much, Professor Soh, for your insights, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Professor.
You too. Thank you.
And thank you, Walter, as always. We're going to have you back here next week.
See you next week.